The stars stretched out in every direction, as endless as the darkness of space itself. Among them, a ship cut through the silence like a blade. It was sleek, its dark metal surface reflecting the cold emptiness of space. Inside, the air was thick with the hum of advanced machinery and the presence of the supreme commander of the Empire, Queen Nyxeria. Nyxeria sat in her command chair, eyes fixed on the small blue planet below, Earth. She had heard much about this primitive world, a place teeming with life, yet insignificant in the grand scope of the universe. To her, it was just another planet, another world ripe for conquest. She had seen countless civilizations fall before her empire's might, and Earth, with its primitive technology and fragile inhabitants, would be no different. Her species had mastered the art of war and conquest. They were the epitome of strength, their ships and weapons far beyond anything Earth could imagine. The Queen had watched the humans for months now, observing their behavior from afar. She had read their history, wars fought over borders, ideologies, and resources. She saw a species full of conflict, but also full of weaknesses. They were fractured, their technology barely enough to defend themselves against the creatures of their own world, let alone the might of the alien empire. As the ship's artificial gravity pulled her deeper into the seat, Nyxeria allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Earth would fall under her rule, just as so many other worlds had. She could already see the humans' future, enslaved, controlled, and bending to her will. She would bring order to their chaos, and in doing so, she would prove the superiority of her people. "Approaching target," a voice echoed through the ship's intercom, pulling Nyxeria from her thoughts. She stood up, her long, silver armor glinting under the artificial lights. Her sharp eyes, the color of molten lava, narrowed as she gazed out at the planet. "Prepare for landing," she commanded. Her voice was cold, authoritative, like the air of space itself. The ship descended toward Earth, its speed increasing as it neared the atmosphere. Nyxeria felt the slight pressure of the ship's descent, but she paid it no mind. She had faced far worse in her travels across the galaxy. The Earth's atmosphere was nothing compared to the hostile environments she had conquered in the past. Soon the ship broke through the clouds, and below her she saw the vast stretch of forests, mountains, and oceans. A planet rich with life, yet so small and fragile. Earth seemed like a place of beauty, but Nyxeria knew better. The beauty was an illusion, masking the underlying weakness of its inhabitants. The ship landed silently in a secluded forest, hidden away from prying eyes. Nyxeria stepped out, her boots crunching against the soft earth beneath her. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp soil, but it didn't matter to her. She wasn't here for the beauty of the planet. She was here to see the humans with her own eyes and determine if they were worthy of the fate she had already decided for them. She stood alone in the clearing, her towering figure casting a long shadow on the ground. The soft breeze brushed against her face, but she remained unmoved. Her mind was focused on the task at hand. She had come to Earth not only as a conqueror, but as a scientist. She wanted to understand what made these creatures tick. What drove them to fight, to survive? She had read their history, but reading was different from seeing. She wanted to observe their behavior firsthand, to witness how they interacted with their environment and with each other. From her vantage point, she could see a small town not far in the distance. It was a quiet place, nestled between the trees, with roads that twisted and turned like veins through the earth. She focused her eyes on it, scanning the area with her enhanced vision. She saw people moving about, some working, some walking, others simply existing in the mundane rhythm of their daily lives. They seemed harmless, ordinary, weak, yet there was something about them that intrigued her. Despite their weaknesses, they continued to survive. She had seen many species fall apart in the face of adversity, but humans seemed to endure. How? What made them different from the countless civilizations she had destroyed in her empire's expansion? Nyxeria's thoughts were interrupted by the faint sound of something in the distance. She turned her head slightly and caught sight of a figure approaching. A man. He was walking with a purpose, his gait steady and determined, as though he had a mission to accomplish. Nyxeria's sharp eyes studied him as he moved, noting the simple clothing he wore, nothing extravagant, nothing impressive. Just a man in worn boots and a faded shirt. She found it curious that this man didn't seem to notice the ship or her presence. But perhaps that was to be expected. Humans were not accustomed to seeing alien ships descending from the sky. They were still too primitive, too caught up in their own limited understanding of the universe. The man stopped at the edge of the clearing, glancing around nervously. He seemed to sense something was off, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. Nyxaria remained motionless, watching him from the shadows, her gaze unwavering. For a moment they simply stood there, two beings from vastly different worlds, separated by space, time, and purpose. Nyxaria wondered if he could feel her presence. Could he sense the power that radiated from her, the aura of someone who had seen countless worlds fall before her? Or was he too insignificant to notice? The man took a step forward, his eyes darting about as though searching for something or someone. He seemed to be alone, but that didn't necessarily mean anything. She knew better than to assume anything about humans based on first impressions. Without a word, Nyxaria stepped forward from the shadows, her footsteps silent against the forest floor. The man froze, his eyes widening in shock as he turned to face her. She could see the fear in his eyes, but also something else, something she hadn't expected. There was a spark of defiance, a hint of challenge in his stance. It was at that moment that Nyxaria understood. This man wasn't afraid of her in the way most would be. He didn't tremble, didn't beg for mercy. Instead, he studied her, his mind working, trying to figure out what she was, what she wanted, and how to survive this encounter. In all her years, in all the worlds she had conquered, Nyxaria had never encountered such a reaction. Fear, yes, desperation, certainly, but this was something different. She felt the stirrings of something deep within her, an unfamiliar emotion. Was it respect? Was it curiosity? Or was it something else entirely? "Who are you?" the man asked, his voice steady but tinged with uncertainty. He had seen enough battles to know when he was outmatched, yet he didn't back down. Nyxaria studied him, her eyes narrowing slightly. She had heard that humans were full of surprises, but she never expected to find one standing before her who didn't immediately cower at the sight of her strength. "I am Nyxaria, queen of the Zalkran Empire," she said, her voice cold, her presence overwhelming. "And you?" "What are you?" The man met her gaze, his eyes unflinching. "I'm just a soldier, one of many, but I'll fight for my people no matter what." Nyxaria's lips curled into a faint smile. This man's defiance was interesting, but it would be short-lived. She had seen enough to know that humans were no match for the power of her empire. Yet, as she turned to leave, a small seed of doubt began to grow in the back of her mind. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was more to these humans than she had initially thought. The sun was beginning to set behind the tall trees, casting long shadows over the quiet village. The air had a crispness to it, the kind that heralded the changing of seasons. The village was peaceful, nestled between the rolling hills of the countryside, surrounded by lush forests. Life seemed simple here, just as it had in so many other places Nyxaria had seen. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. These humans, they seemed to have an energy, a determination that caught her attention. Nyxaria stood in the shadows of the forest, hidden from view, her sharp eyes scanning the village. She had come here to observe, to learn more about the humans and their way of life. She had heard rumors that these creatures were resilient, that they could survive in even the harshest conditions. But so far, all she had seen were lives marked by simplicity and fragility. It was then that she saw them, the alien soldiers. They came out of nowhere, a small but deadly group that had slipped past the human defenses unnoticed. Their bodies were covered in dark armor, their weapons gleaming in the fading light. They moved swiftly and silently, like shadows in the night. They were here to test the humans, to see if they would fight back. The first human who noticed them was an elderly man who had been walking along the dirt road, heading toward the village square. He stopped in his tracks as he saw the aliens advancing toward him, their eyes glowing red with hunger. Fear spread through the man's body, but before he could react, one of the soldiers raised his weapon, aiming directly at him. Nyxaria felt the familiar urge to intervene to put an end to this quickly. But she held back, watching intently as the elderly man took a deep breath, his face set in determination. He wasn't running. He wasn't begging for mercy. Instead, he turned and shouted, "Get inside." "Everyone get inside." His voice carried through the village, warning the others. Within seconds, people were rushing to their homes, slamming doors shut, pulling down shutters. Nyxaria's eyes flicked back to the advancing soldiers. They were closing in on the elderly man, and she knew they would not hesitate to kill him. But then, something unexpected happened. From the crowd that had gathered in the square, a figure stepped forward. A man, younger than the elderly one, but just as determined. He stood tall, wearing simple clothes, a faded jacket and pants that had clearly seen better days. His boots were worn, but his posture was straight, unwavering. He didn't look afraid. The alien soldiers paused for a moment, confused by his sudden appearance. Nyxaria, too, felt her interest spike. This human? He wasn't running like the others. He wasn't hiding. Instead, he was walking calmly toward the soldiers, his eyes locked on them with a quiet defiance. The first soldier raised his weapon, aiming it at the man, but before he could fire, the human was already moving. With a speed that Nyxaria hadn't expected, the man leaped to the side, dodging the blast that came at him. He didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. He simply moved. The soldiers were momentarily caught off guard, but they quickly regained their composure. They moved in closer, their weapons ready to strike. But the human soldier was faster, more agile than Nyxaria had anticipated. He ducked under the next blast, then launched himself at one of the soldiers, knocking him to the ground with a well-placed punch. Nyxaria felt a flicker of something she hadn't expected, a spark of curiosity. She had seen many battles, many wars, but never had she seen such quick thinking from a creature so small, so seemingly insignificant. This human, this soldier, was doing the impossible. The battle that followed was unlike any she had ever witnessed. The man was relentless. He used the terrain to his advantage, ducking behind trees, jumping over rocks, and moving like a shadow himself. He didn't seem to tire. Each movement was calculated, every strike precise. Nyxaria's eyes narrowed as she watched him fight, impressed by his tactics, his endurance. The humans had not only survived against a superior enemy, but were now fighting back with a fierceness that shook her belief in their weakness. Despite their technological inferiority, despite their limited resources, they were proving something she had never considered. Humans had a fire within them, a desire to protect what was theirs, to survive at any cost. It wasn't just strength that they lacked, it was the will to fight. And this soldier, this man, had that in abundance. One by one, the alien soldiers fell. It was as though they hadn't expected such resistance, such cunning from a species they had deemed beneath them. But the man didn't stop. He moved with a single purpose, to protect the village, to stop the invaders. Nyxaria's heart began to race as she realized just how much she had underestimated these creatures. She had thought they were weak, but this human was showing her the depths of their strength. As the last of the soldiers was defeated, the man stood alone in the village square, breathing heavily but standing tall. His clothes were torn, his body bruised, but he had won. He had beaten the invaders and the village was safe, for now. Nyxaria remained hidden, her mind racing. She had seen strength before, but it had always come from superior technology, superior power. What she had witnessed today, however, was different. It was something raw, something primal. It was the human spirit. The man slowly turned, his eyes scanning the now quiet village. He was looking for any sign of danger, any remaining threat. His gaze briefly swept over the people who had emerged from their homes to see what had happened. They were looking at him with awe, with gratitude, but it wasn't fear that he saw in their eyes. It was respect. He had earned it through his actions, through his unwavering courage in the face of overwhelming odds. As Nyxaria stood there watching him, she realized something. She had underestimated humans. She had believed they were nothing more than weak creatures, easily conquered, easily controlled. But what she had witnessed today was something that no weapon, no technology could defeat. It was something she could not understand. Yet. The human soldier's name, she learned later, was Alex. He wasn't a general, wasn't a leader of armies. He was just one man standing alone against an invincible enemy, and he had won. Nyxaria, in all her power, had never encountered such a thing before. She had never seen a species so willing to fight for their survival, so determined to protect what they held dear. It was both troubling and awe-inspiring. As night fell over the village, Nyxaria retreated into the shadows. She needed time to think, to process what she had seen. The humans were not as she had thought. They were not weak. They were resilient. They were fierce. And they were not going down without a fight. For the first time, Nyxaria felt something stir within her that she hadn't felt before. Doubt. The days after the battle had passed in a blur of quiet reflection. Nyxaria watched the humans from afar, her thoughts lingering on the soldier, Alex. She had seen many species fall to her empire, all of them far more powerful than humans in terms of technology and physical strength. But this human had done something she could not dismiss. He had stood alone against her soldiers, defeated them, and saved his village. It was not a fluke, she could feel it. There was something about this human that made him different. His strength wasn't in his weapons or his technology, it was something deeper, something raw. He had a drive that was impossible to ignore. Nyxaria's instincts as a ruler and warrior told her that this human could not be left unchecked. She had to see if his abilities were truly what they appeared to be. She had underestimated him once, and she would not make that mistake again. So she decided to challenge him directly. She watched as Alex trained with the villagers, teaching them how to defend themselves in case of another attack. It was clear that he was a natural leader. His every movement, his every command was met with respect. His actions were not those of a soldier in a losing battle, but of a man who had seen too much and yet refused to surrender. Nyxaria approached him under the cover of night, when the village was quiet and the air was thick with anticipation. She knew he would be prepared for something. He had to be. But what she was about to propose would test not only his physical limits but also his very spirit. She appeared before him without warning. Alex didn't flinch at her sudden appearance. Instead, his eyes locked onto hers, measuring her, assessing her. He knew instinctively that this was no ordinary encounter. She was the queen of an alien empire, after all. "I have been watching you, human," Nyxaria said, her voice cold and commanding. "You have proven yourself a worthy adversary, but there is only so much a weak species can achieve through sheer will. I challenge you to a one-on-one fight. You will see firsthand what true strength is." Alex didn't immediately respond. He was calculating, studying her just as she had studied him. She could see the hesitation in his eyes, the brief flicker of doubt, but it was quickly replaced with the same determination she had seen on the battlefield. "You want to fight me?" Alex said, his voice low but steady. "Why, you've already seen what I'm capable of." "Because," Nyxaria said, stepping closer, "I need to know if you are truly worth my time, if your species is worthy of the future I have planned for it." A tense silence hung between them. For a moment, the world around them seemed to disappear. It was just the two of them, standing in the moonlight, preparing for a test that would determine much more than just the outcome of a single battle. This was a test of survival. A test of belief. Alex finally nodded. "I'll fight, but not for you, not for anyone else. I fight because this is my world and I won't let you take it from me." Nyxaria's lips curled into a faint smile. There was something magnetic about the human's defiance. He was fearless not because he thought he could win, but because he believed in his cause. It was rare and it was powerful. The two of them moved into the center of the village, the onlookers gathering in the shadows, watching in silence. Nyxaria wasn't used to having an audience, but she didn't mind. This battle would prove everything. She wasn't just fighting for her empire now, she was fighting for her very understanding of what made a species strong. The fight began with a sudden clash. Nyxaria moved faster than Alex had expected, her speed and strength overwhelming. She struck with precision, her blows landing with the force of a falling meteor. Alex barely had time to react, dodging and parrying her attacks as best he could. He was quick, but she was faster. She could feel his muscles straining, his mind racing to calculate his next move, and she admired that. But it wasn't enough. She landed another blow, this one knocking him back several feet. The air left his lungs in a sharp gasp as he hit the ground hard. For a moment he lay there, stunned, trying to catch his breath. Nyxaria stood over him, her form towering, her weapon raised. "Get up," she commanded, her voice unwavering. "Show me your strength." Alex pushed himself to his feet, his body sore, his breath ragged. He wiped the blood from his lip and steadied himself. "I'm not done yet," he said, his voice filled with determination. "I don't care how strong you are, I won't give up." She could see the fire in his eyes, the resolve that refused to be extinguished. For a moment, something stirred within her. She had fought countless beings, destroyed civilizations far more advanced than this one, but she had never seen such perseverance. Humans, for all their weaknesses, had a fire inside them that no other species had. The fight resumed, this time with Alex taking a more defensive approach. He had learned quickly. He dodged Nyxaria's blows, using his surroundings to his advantage, ducking behind a large crate and circling around her. She was strong, yes, but she wasn't invincible. And Alex knew that. He wasn't as fast as her, but he had learned to read her movements to anticipate where she would strike next. With a sudden burst of energy, he launched himself at her, throwing a punch with everything he had. Nyxaria blocked it, but just barely. She could feel the power behind the blow, the weight of the human's strength. It wasn't the strength of a warrior, but of someone who had fought for survival his entire life. There was something brutal, something raw about it. They continued to clash, each one pushing the other to their limits. Nyxaria felt the sweat trickling down her face, the tension in her muscles as she blocked and parried. She had fought the best warriors in the galaxy, but this was different. This wasn't a battle of power alone. This was a battle of will. And for the first time, Nyxaria began to doubt herself. Every punch she threw, every strike she made, Alex matched her with equal force. It wasn't that he was stronger, it was that he refused to back down. He was relentless. His every movement, every strike was driven by something she couldn't understand, something she couldn't control. Finally, after what felt like hours, the fight reached its peak. Both of them were breathing heavily, their bodies covered in bruises and sweat. Nyxaria's armor was scratched, and Alex's clothes were torn. They were both exhausted, but neither of them was willing to surrender. In a final surge of strength, Alex lunged forward, using his entire body to push Nyxaria back. She stumbled just for a moment, but it was enough. Alex took advantage of the opening, landing a solid blow to her chest. Nyxaria staggered back, feeling the impact reverberate through her body. She hadn't expected it. She hadn't thought that a human could land such a blow. She stood there panting, staring at the human soldier who had just forced her back. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel invincible. She didn't feel superior. She felt something new, something she hadn't expected: respect. Alex stood across from her, his chest rising and falling with each breath. His muscles ached, his body screamed in pain, but he refused to give up. He refused to stop. You're not weak," Nyxaria said, her voice quieter now, tinged with something she couldn't quite place. "You're something else." Alex didn't answer. He didn't need to. He had proven what he came to prove. And for the first time, Nyxaria wasn't sure who had won this fight. The quiet of the village was deafening after the fight had ended. Nyxaria stood in the center, her chest rising and falling with each labored breath. Her armor was scratched and dented, the usual flawless surface now marred by the force of the battle. Her legs were trembling from the strain, her mind racing with thoughts she had never expected to have about a species as insignificant as humans. Alex stood across from her, his breath equally heavy, his body bruised and battered. His clothes were torn and his face was streaked with blood. Despite the pain, there was no fear in his eyes. There was only determination, a stubborn refusal to give up, to yield to the overwhelming power that Nyxaria possessed. She had seen strength before. In the many worlds she had conquered, she had faced countless warriors, each with their own unique abilities, their own strategies. But none of them had fought like this. None of them had the spirit, the relentless will to survive that Alex had displayed. Nyxaria had come here to test him, to prove that her species, her empire, was superior. But the test had backfired. She wasn't sure who had won anymore. It wasn't about strength or tactics. It was about something deeper. Something that she, with all her power and knowledge, could not fully comprehend. For a moment they simply stood there, looking at each other in silence. The village was still, the air thick with tension. Nyxaria was the first to break the silence. "You've surprised me, human," she said, her voice low but carrying. "I did not expect you to fight the way you did. You are not like the others." Alex didn't respond immediately. He wiped the blood from his lip, his eyes never leaving hers. "I told you. I fight for my people, for my world. I'm not going to let anyone take it away." Nyxaria nodded slowly. "I see that now. I see why you fight." She paused, her gaze softening for a brief moment. "But it's not enough. Your people are weak. You cannot survive on will alone. You are no match for the might of the Zalkran Empire." Alex took a step forward, his eyes intense. "We'll fight no matter what, even if we're outmatched, even if we're overrun. You underestimate us if you think we'll just give up." A flicker of something stirred in Nyxaria's chest. She had always been certain of her empire's superiority. Her species had conquered worlds, defeated enemies that had thought they were invincible. And yet here she was, facing a human soldier who was challenging everything she had believed about strength and survival. Nyxaria turned away, walking to the edge of the village square. She needed to think. She had been certain that her empires would crush humanity effortlessly, but now she wasn't so sure. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of movement behind her. Alex had followed her, his footsteps light and cautious. He wasn't afraid of her. It was almost as if he understood that she was no longer just an enemy to him. She wasn't sure how to feel about that. "You're not going to destroy us, are you?" Alex's voice broke the silence again, firm but not demanding. Nyxaria paused. She didn't answer at first. The question lingered in the air, heavier than the silence itself. It wasn't just a question about his life. It was a question about the future of humanity. About whether they were worth saving, or if they were just another species to be wiped out in the name of her empire's expansion. She turned to face him. "What makes you think you are worth saving?" Alex didn't flinch. "Because we fight, because we don't give up. You can destroy our cities, wipe out our armies, but you can't destroy our spirit. That's what makes us different." Nyxaria studied him closely. There was no arrogance in his voice, no false bravado. It was a simple, quiet truth that she couldn't deny. She had seen what humans were capable of in the face of adversity, and it made her question everything she had known about strength. She had fought for power her entire life, but power wasn't just about strength. It wasn't just about technology or weapons. It was something else entirely, something she hadn't realized she was searching for. Her empire had never faced a species like humanity. They had faced strong civilizations, proud species, but none of them had the same drive, the same fire that burned in humans. And it was that fire that made Nyxaria stop. It made her reconsider. For the first time, she questioned whether her empire's methods were right. Was conquest the answer? Was destruction the only path? Or was there something more to these humans, something that could be learned from them? She had come to Earth to conquer it, to bring it under the control of the Zalkran Empire. But now, she wasn't so sure. Alex, standing there in front of her, was more than just a soldier. He was a symbol of what humanity could be, a species that refused to back down, no matter the odds. And that was what terrified Nyxaria. She had never been afraid before, never doubted her empire's superiority. But now, facing Alex, facing the truth in his eyes, she realized that perhaps humans weren't as weak as she had thought. Perhaps they had something she had been overlooking all along. "Why are you still here?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. She wasn't sure what she wanted him to say. "Because this is my world," Alex replied simply, "and I'll protect it." Nyxaria felt a strange sense of awe wash over her. This human soldier standing before her wasn't just fighting to survive. He was fighting for something greater than himself. He was fighting for his people, for his world, for the future. Nyxaria had always fought for power, but Alex fought for hope, and it was that hope that made her question everything. She turned away from him again, her mind racing. She had come to Earth with a plan to conquer it, but now she wasn't so sure if that was the right path. She had seen the strength of humanity, the resilience that came from deep within them. And now she wasn't sure she could destroy that. She wasn't sure she wanted to. She had the power to end this, to wipe out humanity and claim Earth as her own. But what would it mean if she did? What would it mean for her to conquer a species that had shown her such strength? Alex's voice interrupted her thoughts once more. "You know, you don't have to destroy us. You could. You could join us. We don't have to be enemies." Nyxaria paused. She had always seen humanity as beneath her, as nothing more than an obstacle in her empire's path. But now she wasn't so sure. Could they coexist? Could she, the queen of an empire built on conquest, learn from these humans? The thought seemed impossible, yet in her heart she felt the stirrings of something new, a possibility she had never considered. "I don't know if we can," Nyxaria said quietly, more to herself than to Alex. "But I'm willing to listen." For the first time, the alien queen did not feel like a conqueror. She felt like a student of humanity, and that in itself was a victory.